Story 1. The Glowing Lady in the Armchair. In 1969, a 5-year-old boy named Stephen lived with his exceptionally large family in a quiet Welsh town near the England border. 11 children filled the semi-detached brick home, a household size rare today, but typical back then due to limited access to birth control. The house sat nestled in a modest community not far from Chester, humming with the laughter, bickering, and life of a bustling family. Stephen admired two of his elder brothers, John and David, who were in their late teens and owned motorbikes. Their roaring 100cc Yamahas thrilled him to the core. Whenever one of them fired up a bike in the backyard, Stephen would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, eyes wide in anticipation, his imagination painting images of speed and rebellion. On a crisp November evening around 7:30 p.m., David brought home a new girlfriend. Stephen, curious as always, planned to sneak a look from the top of the staircase. But he could hear his mother in the hallway, and her voice alone was enough to keep him frozen in bed. Still, he stayed awake, ears tuned to every sound. From upstairs, Stephen heard laughter and chatter. His mother, two sisters, David, and an unfamiliar female voice. As the evening wore on, he tiptoed to the staircase just as David and the girl were saying their goodbyes. The girl, introduced as Janet, had long blonde hair and wore a leather jacket. She pulled it tight as she stood beside David. That's when she turned to him and whispered something that drained the color from his face. "Your family is lovely," Janet said, except for the old woman in the armchair who stared at me the whole time and never said a word. David's brow furrowed. "What woman?" "You know," Janet replied. "The old lady with white hair, a floral pink dress, twisted hands from arthritis, and a walking stick laid across her knees." She had a black headband holding her hair back. Stephen's blood ran cold. That was their grandmother. But she had died 6 months earlier. Both boys had once been scolded and even struck by that same stick when they misbehaved. She was as real to them as the walls of the house, and yet she was buried now. Still, Janet had seen her, described her perfectly. David slowly explained to her that the woman she saw had passed away. Janet, unfazed, muttered, "Well, she was rude glaring at me like that." Stephen never heard the front door close. He just stood there, frozen, as if the house itself had fallen silent. The thought of going downstairs clawed at him, but he remembered being yelled at just days earlier for sneaking out of bed. Instead, he left the light on and slipped under the covers, hoping desperately that the ghost of their arthritic grandmother would be too stiff to climb the stairs. And even then, something felt wrong. He thought he saw a flicker of movement in the shadowy hallway that night. Something limping. Story 2. The Phantom in the Walls. Years later, Stephen recalled how the haunting might have started long before Janet saw the ghost. His parents had survived the horrors of World War I. His father, Ronald, a former RAF wireless operator and air gunner, had served in North and West Africa. His mother, Elsie, a soap factory worker, had endured the Blitz in Birkenhead, losing family to the bombings. In 1959, they moved into a spacious 5-bedroom house in Shotton, North Wales, a step up from the cramped cottages they'd known. The house had a large garden and even an indoor bathroom, but almost immediately, strange things began to happen. A heavy stone jug once slid 3 feet across the kitchen floor, spun in a perfect circle, and glided back to where it started. Cutlery vanished from the drawers, only to be found neatly arranged on the bedroom dresser. Their German shepherd, Flash, refused to step foot in the kitchen, and their cat, Cheeky, would suddenly arch her back and hiss at something invisible. Then the attacks began. Elsie would wake at night with an overwhelming sensation of invisible hands clutching her throat. Gasping, terrified, She began sleeping upright, light on, always watching. At first, she suspected Ronald, but he'd be deeply asleep beside her. The Phantom Strangler came too, sometimes 3 times a week. Afraid to frighten her children or provoke whatever was tormenting her, Elsie kept silent. She even avoided switching bedrooms, fearing it might begin haunting the kids instead. But she noticed one thing: the attacks never happened when her own mother stayed over. The night her mother died, the attacks stopped. So did the moving objects. For years, the family said nothing until Janet saw the ghost in the chair. Only then did Elsie admit the truth. She believed the poltergeist had been real and that her mother's presence had kept it at bay. When she passed, the grandmother's spirit stayed behind to protect them. Stephen ended his account with a haunting certainty. His grandmother, strict and unyielding in life, loved his mother so fiercely that even in death, she came back to keep her safe.